Enga mana, enga reo, enga waka, tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening, everyone. This event has been in the planning for quite a while, so it's really wonderful to see it finally come alive here tonight. And we were talking with the minister this week and we were panicking about the Auckland weather, saying what happens if we can't proceed? And then of course we have the traffic problems as well. So it's wonderful that everyone is here. Can I acknowledge the presence of our Minister, Priyanka Radhakrishnan. Thank you, Minister, for being with us tonight. Everyone, the Minister has been really focused on this event. She said that in her speech. She kept saying to us, make sure it's fun, make sure it's lively, make sure it's interesting. So we put a lot of effort into trying to make that happen for her and for all of you tonight. I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of Member of Parliament Nancy Chen. I think she might be here, or at least I think she was planning to come. And to acknowledge my dear colleague Laulumak Leoane, the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Culture and Heritage. I've known Mac in his previous role as CE for the Ministry for Pacific Peoples. Mac, being Samoan, is totally aligned to our vibe on culture tonight. Thanks, Mac, for coming all the way from Wellington to be with us. Last but not least, I want to acknowledge Professor Edwina Pio for her presence. Edwina's just returned from a long trip overseas where she walked, I think, 300 kilometers, and her feet are aching, I understand. So it's good that you're here with us, Edwina. We will be officially launching her book, Aotearoa Bharat Māori-Indian, very soon, and I will introduce her properly then. Thank you as well, Edwina, for being with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, some years ago, quite a few years ago actually, I met an Indian woman GP who had recently arrived here in Aotearoa. She went to work on her first day wearing a vibrant blue silk sari. And at the end of that day, she was called to see her boss. She thought it was for a debrief on how her day had gone. So she started some chit-chat with him in his office. And he paused and said, rather uncomfortably, I need to share something with you. He said, in New Zealand, we dress professionally when we come to work. Could you please wear something more suited to our workplace when you come tomorrow? I can still see the tears in her eyes as I recount that story to you today. She had worn her best sari to work as a symbol of pride and of respect for her employer. It was her expression of her cultural identity. But the colors were just too bright and the sari just one step too far for their workplace. Fast forward today, about 16 years, I met a young Indian woman here in Auckland. She's part of a youth leadership network, very dynamic, ambitious young woman working for a global consultancy firm. She wore a sari to our meeting. And we said, gosh, that's a beautiful sari. And she said, I wear that to work every day. And when I go to work, people say, oh, that's interesting. What's that outfit you're wearing? And makes it a point of conversation. She gets to talk about her Indian identity. Our identity matters wherever we come from. We have our cultural identity in the DNA of who we are. We can't just leave it at home when we venture out into the world. And respect and appreciation of our culture leaves a deep and profound impact on our sense of belonging, as the Minister said in her speech. It is vital to our overall sense of well-being. Without it, we shrivel up inside and become less than who we are. Some of you in this room are on stage or in the room, identify with more than one culture. Nearly 1 in 4 children under the age of 14 identify with more than one ethnicity. More than half of Maori identify with 2 or more ethnic groups. This fusion of identities is a source of cultural innovation as we are experiencing right here tonight. It is so important that we create spaces in public life where people from diverse cultures can share who they are by expressing their unique cultural identities. Young people need to see that their cultural identity is valued in New Zealand, so they have the confidence to participate in public life and to help shape New Zealand. There are many things we can all individually do to promote this, like the young Indian woman I described who took her own initiative to say, this is who I am. One amazing way to achieve this, though, is by encouraging our ethnic cultural sector. We want the sector to be a beacon that transmits our unique cultural identities across New Zealand, so people can learn about who we are and who we are becoming. Actually, no, it's more than that. It's marvel at who we are, what we bring, and what New Zealand is becoming. We want people to appreciate our diversity by including us in platforms for cultural expression and to share our cultures to enrich the lives of others. There's a bigger picture than that, though, that we must all take into account. New Zealand's cultural sector has the potential to shape the brand of Aotearoa New Zealand so the world can see us as a leader amongst nations on diversity and inclusion. We already have that reputation, and we must enhance it further because the world needs this leadership. Today, we are taking another step in that direction by holding this event. This event highlights the importance of the ethnic cultural sector and engages us in discussions on how we can promote its growth and prosperity in our country. We know there's much more that can be done in this space, and that's why we invited Meg to come along as well. We want you to enjoy tonight and the diversity of performances we are about to experience. I sincerely hope everyone leaves tonight feeling lifted in the knowledge that there is space for everyone in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and there is magic in sharing our cultures. It is one of those unique areas where 1 + 1 becomes 3 or 4, because sharing multiplies the space for cultural identity and because it creates new things that never existed before. I really hope you enjoy tonight. And having spoken about the fusion of ethnic identities, I'd like to segue now into our next session, which is all about this. It is my honor to introduce our special and distinguished guest, Professor Edwina Pio. Stay seated for a moment, Edwina. I've got a few more things to say about you. She is the author of the book we are officially launching today, Aotearoa Bharat Māori-Indian. You will hear more about the book from her directly in a minute. Edwina is New Zealand's first Emeritus Professor of Diversity in New Zealand. She's a prodigious writer in this space. She has written over half a dozen books. Her research has been published in leading international journals and media outlets. She was appointed by Minister Andrew Little to be on Kapuya, the ministerial advisory group related to the implementation of the recommendations made by the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch mosque attacks. She was also appointed to the Rutherford Discovery Fellowship Humanities and Social Sciences panel in recognition of her expertise in this space. Edwina has dedicated her career and her life to diversity, inclusion because she truly cares. That care for service earned her the King's New Year's honours as an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit this year. Congratulations, Edwina, it's really well deserved. I've known Edwina for almost 20 years. We've met numerous times. We catch up for dinner, lunch, or coffee, where we talk and talk and talk. And Edwina is clearly, to me, obsessed with diversity and inclusion. She talks about little else, to be honest. She's one of the few people who has taken the charge on understanding the connections that were and continue to be built between Māori and ethnic communities. We know that those connections are critical to the evolvement of Aotearoa New Zealand as a multicultural country based on bicultural foundations established by Te Tiriti o Waitangi. This is an area that the ministry is focused on as one of its priorities, and the minister mentioned that before. In 2009, way back then, Edwina wrote a book entitled Cast Away, Unfolding Māori-Indian, which focused on the relationship between Māori and Indian people in New Zealand. She was very excited then when she asked me, she said, did you know there are more than 3,000 Māori Indians in New Zealand that have created their own unique cultural identity in Aotearoa, New Zealand? I didn't know. That publication was launched by the Office of Ethnic Affairs then. Last year, I had a phone call from Edwina, and she said, Mervyn, I've just written another book on Māori-Indian connections, and I'm happy to gift it to the ministry so you can use it for your work. And so she did. And so we are here today for the launch of her book. Her achievements speak for themselves. All the years I have known her, a few things have remained consistent. Edwina is kind, soft-spoken, and oozes humility. Please join me in welcoming Professor Edwina Pio to launch her book.
Harikua takunaka. My heart is overflowing listening to the wonderful things which Mervyn has said and Priyanka, the minister. And it's wonderful to have so many people over here today, people of the heart, people who care, and people who are here to support each other, to support ethnic communities, and to support our diverse identities. In my hands, I held a remarkable photograph, a woman of great beauty draped in an Indian sari. The woman was Maori. I try and look into her eyes to look for her emotions. Is she happy and joyous? Is she sad and grieving? My curiosity and imagination piqued. I venture into that elusive and enigmatic world of the Maori-Indian and the Kumara wine. Sir Paul Reeves, many years ago, encouraged me to write in this area. And when you read the book, a number of people have asked me, where can we buy it? The book is kept for you, it's free. And you can also use the QR code in the wonderful installation that has been put up over there, which again Priyanka mentioned is interactive. I've carried out the research with a humble heart, henaku mahaki, and with integrity. Kia tika o mahi. So what hopes shall we gather, and what dreams shall we sow? You have 2 more days of the conference coming up. In our woven universe, immigration stories have multicolored, gleaming threads, entwined with motifs of history, culture, work, and gender. How do we navigate our worlds? How is voice and silence enacted in the theatre of our lives? Kate Shepherd said, all that separates, whether of race, class, creed, or sex, is inhuman and must be overcome. New Zealand global indices note that in the Corruption Perception Index, New Zealand ranks number 1, best in the world. In doing business, again, we rank number 1. In the Global Gender Gap Index, we rank number 5. And in the Prosperity Index, New Zealand is 7. So Aotearoa is an extraordinary space, based on heritage, shape-shifting, transformative possibilities, and the Ministry for Ethnic Communities is part of its fabric. With Manaki Tanga, Minister Radhakrishnan, the MEC staff and leaders, especially Mervyn, I won't say Saint Mervyn, center their efforts on supporting people, advancing research, and caring for one another during exceptionally challenging times. We must hold true to our deeper origins, where for over a century, Aotearoa has been a place of accessible and transformative opportunities, a place which aspires to both equity and excellence through fully engaging with Te Tiriti and anchored in the culture and whenua where we stand. As a species, we delight in stories. We all have stories tucked in corners of our heart. Stories can provide a glimpse of something more eternal, to decorate, embellish, nourish, and challenge our daily life. From our vulnerable positions, we accept and acknowledge diversity and possibility. I'm sure when you look around the room and look around at your tables, you see this wonderful diversity manifested today. This book functions as an invitation to understand the woven strands in our life stories and appreciate the rich diversity of people within Aotearoa. MEC can advocate for the kinds of conditions necessary to create the backdrop where such stories, stories of triumph, stories of celebration, are a more frequent occurrence. Carl Sagan, the astrophysicist and cosmologist, noted that our planet is a mote of dust suspended on a sunbeam. Yet, we work, play, love, laugh, crave, build community, compose, you heard the beautiful music earlier, anguish, grieve, dance, and thrive in the tapestry of life. Each human being is a multiplicity of miracles. And we all have 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows in our relationships with each other. Instead of fighting for things we don't like, we must seek to find synergy and cooperation with generosity practices such as material giving, giving freedom from fear, and spiritual giving. Equanimity is love plus tenderness with clear boundaries. What would the voice of self-care say? I hear many ethnic people saying that they feel diminished. How can we rest? How can we heal and experience ease? For self-care is good stewardship of my life and the gifts I have to offer to others. In the volatile mix of Aotearoa's changing demography, how do we create futures we dream of? Futures threaded with rational compassion, inclusiveness, work, so we don't stretch our hand out for the dole, where each person puts back into the kete for the privilege of living in this beautiful country. Mervyn mentioned the first book, and Belinda was also instrumental at that point in time for signing the contract. I'd like to acknowledge her. When you look through the book, one of the chapters starts with Tikani Tihua Iriha. So many years ago, I was in Melbourne at a conference, and one of the keynote speakers there had a very British accent, but I said, I'm sure this man is Indian. So I went and chatted with him, and he said, well, I was born in New Zealand. I said, what do you mean? And he was the first person who told me about the Tamil bell. And you have the picture of the Tamil bell over there in the installation. So Tikani Tihua Iriya means the little Indian chief of the Tihua tribe, a name bestowed by Maori on an Indian baby boy born in Wellington in the early 1950s. The baby's parents were Mr. and Mrs. Lakshmipati, who were among the first wave of Indian diplomats to New Zealand. Interestingly, the Indian embassy here in Wellington said to me they can find no record of these names. They were based in Wellington from 1950 to 1954. They arrived as a newly married young couple and had a baby boy while living in Karori, Wellington. Deeply interested in Maori-Indian links, they had heard of the Tamil bell. They made friends with many Maori who were most welcoming, and when their son was born, offered to name him. Princess Tipuya was a close acquaintance of this man's parents. So this is a little that I've read out for you from the book. The baby son, Dr. Shalindra Vyakarnam, is today a respected entrepreneur and academic in the UK. I sent him a PDF version of the book and he was absolutely thrilled. So he sent me photographs, which you see here, as proof that his parents were over here in Aotearoa. And what of the Tamil bell that Mr. Lakshmipati took an interest in? This is a bronze bell, 13 centimeters long, 9 centimeters deep, which was found by Maori in the roots of a large tree. And guess what they used it for? I thought that was very clever, actually, as a cooking pot. If you invert the bell, it is a cooking pot. And the bell has captured the curiosity of many people. It's written in Old Tamil. There were many ships plying the spice trade, ships by Tamilians plying the spice trade. They had bells. When they've looked at the chemistry of the bell, it was cast in Europe. In fact, maybe at some point in time, that might be another book, a lot of the bells used in Hindu temples were those that they stole from the Portuguese ships, because they did not have the technology for casting bells, which Europe had at that time. Anyway, so the bell is something very interesting. It was possibly on a ship that was shipwrecked and was found by Maori and was used as a cooking pot. And one of the missionaries found it, and it's today at Tipapa Museum. So there's a lovely picture of the bell, and we are so grateful to the courtesy of Tipapa for sharing the photographs with us. There's a Indian company, East India Company, 1 rupee coin. And you have a beautiful hei tiki in milky green, interestingly bought in India by the chairman of the East India Company. So there was a trade happening between Canton, London, New South Wales, and the South Island. This work actually, I did contact a number of people in the South Island, including some Iwis, and they said we have no knowledge of any Indians being involved with our whānau. But when I looked at the ship's records, I found that, well, there are many Indians who are there, but they integrated so strongly with Maori that people found it difficult to differentiate Indian and Maori. So, you know, I think that's quite wonderful in many ways. The book also has a number of stories of people talking about the Lascars, who were seamen. About 20% of people who worked on the ships consisted of Lascars from South Asia or the Indian subcontinent, which would mean today's Pakistan and Bangladesh included as well. In fact, in the previous book, Castaway, I had interviewed a Solomon family, and many people thought that they were Jews. But actually, the father was a Muslim, Suleiman. And that word got, modified to Solomon. And they said that their mother was Maori, father was Muslim. So she loved her pork bones. She had separate vessels for cooking, and he would not touch pork because it was not halal, and he had his separate vessels for cooking. So very interesting stories. You also have a dictionary of bad words, because the Lascars had to do a lot of the hard work. You must have seen some of the anchors, which are really very heavy, the old anchors, and they had to pull them up. So, well, their language was very useful. You have the census in Aotearoa put over there as well, and pen portraits. Sir Anand Satyanand was extremely helpful, along with his daughter Anya, in helping out with this book. If he was born in the 1900s, he would not have been allowed to stand for Governor General, because he would have been considered a race alien. So we've moved quite a lot from that particular period. He was also instrumental in ensuring that a plaque was put up for Black Peter, who was of Indian origin and who actually was the first to discover gold. But trust the Aussies, they came along and they said, well, we'll put in a claim, and they were given the claim. So that's another part of the story, and there's some beautiful pictures including Queen Elizabeth knighting Sir Anand Satyanand, and a picture of Sir Paul Reeve's wife at his funeral. Gayatri Wood is another example here. Her mother had to be here, but she wasn't able to make it. Her first name was given to her after consulting the Hindu zodiac calendar. And Gayatri means a hymn or song, and the Gayatri mantra, those who are adherents of Hinduism would know that it is a sacred, revered hymn. Gayatri's mother is Indian, her father is Naitahu, Ngāti Mamoi, as well as British and Irish heritage. Then you've got Lakhvinder Singh. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to make it. He's a rugby player. I have had many people tell me Indians will get more acceptance when they produce rugby players. But I think the Indian mums are a bit nervous of sending their boys to play with the big rugby players. So that's Lakhvinder Singh. And we have with us today Matt Renata and his wife. And Matt is featured in this book. He was born and raised in Lower Hutt by a Gujarati mother and a Maori father. His Maori grandfather had a near-death experience in 1990. And this brought a new perspective to his life, increasing his faith to do good and bring heaven and earth together, and encouraging Matt to speak Maori more and value whakapapa. At one point, he was against Matt's Gujarati mum and Maori dad being together. I'm sure many people here would have experienced what happens when there is a mixed marriage or a mixed liaison. However, after this experience, he had more love and acceptance in his heart for difference and diversity. This story of his grandfather has challenged Matt's life journey. Matt and his wife Rachel, both of whom are here today, I'm sure you can interact with them later. His wife has Japanese and Maori ancestry, and both have studied indigenous theology and pastoral leadership with a special focus on Maori leadership and full immersion in Tirio. So coming back to the little Indian chief, Tikani Tihua Iria, who was born in Aotearoa in the 1950s, and far back in the 1800s, history records the sons, young Rangatira, of two Maori chiefs who strode across the ship decks and went to Calcutta, Bharat, in 1826. They were taken there by Peter Dillon, who, with a good marketing strategy, renamed these young Rangatira His Royal Highness Brian Boru and His Excellency Morgan McMurrough. Both were well received and performed the Hakka and Wayata at Barakpur in Bharat at the Governor General of Bengal's residence. So this book is a tribute to vision, to encouragement, to sharing, to vulnerability, and the capacity to say, well, if I love someone, I'm going to be with that person. Yet, we sometimes forget that we are created for joy. Our minds are too busy. Our hearts are too heavy to remember that we have been called to dance, the sacred dance of life. May we have the courage to open ourselves to others. Your neighbor's different eyes open another realm to explore and discover with wonder our diverse humanity. May today be an opportunity to wrap yourself with beautiful memories as we print peace and serenity on our beloved earth. Kia tau, tirangi marie, kia ora, namaste. Thank you.